أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Alhamdulillah, assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On what rational premise does the UK government believe that punitive airstrikes will degrade and defeat ISIS? After 397 MPs voted in support of airstrikes in Syria on Wednesday, British Tornado jets launched their first wave of bombing raids overnight on so-called IS targets in Syria.
Commenting on the parliamentary vote itself, observers have noted that how the emotional aftermath from Paris attacks appears to have derailed recent debate in the Commons. Now, here are 10 reasons why the people out there think UK airstrikes in Syria is the incorrect strategy to embrace.
Okay, number 1. British airstrikes in Syria add nothing significant to the ongoing bombing campaign led by the US-led coalition and Russia. At the Commons, many MPs emphasised the need to support our allies, namely France and the United States. However, Britain jumping on the anti-IS bandwagon has jumped on the anti-IS bandwagon to demonstrate that it's still a global policeman under the banner of standing shoulder to shoulder with allies is rather disingenuous.
Number 2. MPs who voted against the airstrikes questioned British Prime Minister David Cameron's phantom army of 70,000 opposition fighters that will fight IS in coordination with the airstrikes. It's important to highlight that currently there are 81 rebel factions fighting the Assad regime, many who would be regarded as Islamist extremists by the same MPs that voted for the airstrikes. With this in mind, which rebel faction is Cameron referring to? The Free Syrian Army, FSA, who are being bombed by Russia, whilst allying themselves with the Jabhat al-Nusra in resisting IS? Or is he alluding to the Kurdish Peshmerga and the YPG, who are fighting IS and Turkey, the latter being an ally of the UK and a NATO member?
Point number 3. Another legitimate question to be asked is that, based on empirical facts, does the IS or the Assad regime have more blood on their hands? Without a shadow of doubt, it is the Assad regime who has slaughtered an overwhelming majority of 250,000 deceased Syrians. Who will these airstrikes really benefit on the ground? Will it be IS or will it be the butcherer Bashar al-Assad?
Number 4. On 4th of October, Cameron argued that Russia's bombing campaign in Syria will cause further radicalization and increase terrorism. If that is the case, then one must ask whether British bombs are immune from causing radicalization and terrorism. The same bombs that pounded Iraq in 2003, which subsequently created the vacuum that gave birth to IS, can quite plausibly do the same in Syria.
Point number 5. Britain and the US were invited to bomb so-called ISIS in Iraq by the so-called elected government of Iraq, which is led by President or Prime Minister, should I say, Haider al-Abadi. In contrast, he has never ever invited Britain to bomb Syria. Why? Neither Assad nor the rebels have invited Britain to bomb Syria. And the regional powers that have fueled the conflict can hardly be regarded as legitimate inviters to this so-called war on ISIS.
Now let's say, for argument's sake, that IS is degraded and defeated, and Cameron's phantom army of 70,000 take Al-Raqqa. Would it be too far-fetched to assume that Assad's forces could bomb the moderate rebels? If that were to happen, is Britain prepared? Now, is Britain prepared to defend the opposition forces against Assad and the Russians?
Point number 7. Are Russia, Iran and Hezbollah and now Assad unintended allies of Britain on the basis of the lesser of two evils, to ISIS. If so, it should be made clear that the years of aggressive rhetoric against the so-called axis of evil, again, by successive British governments, is this merely just a lip service?
Number 8. According to Tory MP David Davis, Cameron's glorification of the brimstone missiles as a possible game changer is based on outdated intelligence. Reports from the Libyan intervention of 2011. If this is true, then it's fair to say that it may not be as effective and accurate as many would like to believe.
Point number 9. Will airstrikes in Syria improve Britain's national security and make us feel safer at home? Who knows? Talking to the BBC, Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said, "Britain is far safer tonight after this decision. In reality, British airstrikes will only strengthen IS's recruitment drive, increasing the likelihood of British Muslims joining them when they see videos and images of innocent Syrians being slaughtered by these tornado jets." The Iraq War was explicitly mentioned by Mohammed Sadiq before the 7/7 attacks and Michael Adibalajo after the murder of Lee Rigby, as were the British airstrikes in Iraq stated by so-called Jihadi John. That name just said shivers down my spine. Right. And the French intervention in Syria by the one of the Paris attackers. Will the government have an answer prepared if homegrown terrorists cite the Syrian airstrikes as a motive for crimes in the future?
I don't know. What would you do? Number 10. Based on Britain's track record in the Middle East, how successful has military intervention been in bringing peace and stability and democracy to the region? If fighting tyranny and oppression was a moral caveat to bombing ISIS, where were these principles in opposing the despotism of Egypt's Hosni Mubarak and now President Sisi? The Gulf monarchies, Benjamin Netanyahu, Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping, the selective application of the so-called heroes, the values in the form of military intervention is hypocritical. And hypocrisy fuels grievances, and grievances, as we all know, have proven to lead to problems.
Wow. Ultimately, bombs do not end wars. The Germans tried it in World War II with the Blitz, and Britain responded in a similar fashion with the Dresden. Neither ended the war. The US-led coalition bombed Afghanistan and Iraq for a whole decade. Today, the Taliban maintains a firm presence, and Iraq remains in turmoil.
Similarly, Assad has been bombing his own people for 4 years now, and that has not ended the war. So on what rational premise does the UK government believe that punitive airstrikes will degrade and defeat ISIS? These are questions that have been continuously asked and repeatedly ignored.
I can only hope that the MPs who voted for airstrikes yesterday will look back at their decision in years to come with regret, knowing that they have contributed to death and destruction in Syria and all over the Middle East. The so-called war on terror has not safeguarded British citizens home or abroad. In fact, it's made the entire world a far more dangerous place. If Al-Qaeda and IS militants were born out of these airstrikes, should anyone sympathize with those who created a vacuum by supporting intervention in Syria? I certainly will not.
My brothers and sisters, you can see from what we have mentioned, the reality out there is the fact that we need to question ourselves. Why is it the case that whenever these attacks happen, whenever an organization arises out of the blue, that it's always the Western powers that go in to defeat them, the so-called Islamic extremist organizations, and all of a sudden it disappears. It gets buried by the West, and when it is said unto them, make no mischief in the earth, they say, we are the peacemakers. Jazakumullah khair for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.